Welcome everybody to Bitcoin Live today on the Thursday evening, that is in Holland. I got a very special guest on the show. It's Daniel Stevens, CEO and founder of Deep3Labs. He's a very smart guy. He's an alumni from Google. He worked, I think, with MIT, Fidelity, and with Stanford. And I think many others probably also. So I want to introduce the show shortly, and we're going to talk about language, ledgers, AI, and we're used to AI learning from words, but what happens when AI learns from transactions instead of text? And if language models learn from human communication, what exactly do transaction native models learn from network activity? And is this a small architectural tweak to LLMs or a complete new class of intelligence? Well, those and other issues we're going to discuss with a super smart guy. Daniel, first, thank you for being on the show again. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Nick. It's great to be back again. And as I said in the backstage here, I'm doing great, despite the fact that, maybe things could be better on the charts out there today.
Well, the product that you developed, as we were saying, like it really ties in nicely with what's happening with the market. I guess, I give the floor to you. Like, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think you teed up a perfect intro to not just what we want to talk about here today, but what's out there in terms of solutions when the charts look like this, right? We at Deep3Labs have developed a tool called Hoku. It's a platform that is using AI and machine learning models that have been trained on the transaction data inside the blockchain itself. And why that's so important in cases like this is, when markets are going up, it's very easy to make winning trades, right? You can kind of just throw a dart at a dartboard and you're probably going to find some profit if you hold long enough. But aside from, short positions and derivatives, when markets are going down like this, it's a lot harder. Really test your mettle as a trader. And what we have seen in our research and what's in Hoku is ultimately that, especially with low cap tokens, when you can spot the right wallet patterns inside the network, you can predict price movements with remarkable accuracy. And when I say remarkable, like, we've been running these tests on 3 different blockchains for the better part of 6 months. And every single time we've run one of these tests, we're seeing over 90% accuracy in the signals that come out of Hoku. And I attribute all of that success to the simple fact that we have trained about 40 different models on transaction data, and each network that is inside Hoku uses these 40 models to generate these predictions and generate this on-chain understanding that you can't get in any other app. So we were, again, talking backstage, the last 24 hours, 48 hours in crypto have been pretty ugly on the charts. The bot that we are running to help guide the research had one of its best days in a while in that same period. So there are still definitely, winning trades out there. It's harder to find them when the market's moving in this way. And we believe the best solution to that is essentially deep analysis of wallet activity and chain data in order to find those patterns.
And I think you also mentioned, like, nobody else is doing this, like, because when you sort of think about it, it's kind of obvious, right? All the data is out there. So you're truly like the first that sort of made these connections and created a working project
that we've ever seen. Yes. And I think there is a reason that there aren't a ton of companies out there doing it. It's hard. And if it's not done right, it's very expensive. For example, when members of our team first started doing this research, this was probably like 2020, 2021, we did everything in the cloud. And we trained one deep learning model, just one model on one network. And we saw our AWS bills hit $20,000. That's one model, one network. Right? Like Hoku right now is running on 3 networks. Every network is about 40 to 50 models. Like I would be buying Jeff Bezos his next yacht if we did all of this stuff in the cloud. And so we have had to take on a lot of additional work at an optimization level. We have to build a lot of our own bare metal in order to do this efficiently. So it is very difficult work. The blockchain is beautiful for decentralized consensus. It is awful for data mining. I mean, you don't even need to be a data scientist to kind of put this together, right? Like, if you were to imagine the worst possible key structure in a database, it would be a hash, because you now have to match, a 40 or 60 character string in one table to a 40 to 60 character string in another table. It's almost like it was purpose built to give people like me a headache in the future.
Can you tell us a little bit, just as a side note, like about your team? Like, who are these other people working with you, so that people sort of can appreciate, like, because it's a team effort, I imagine, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. We are very fortunate to have a lot of bright folks working with us, and in fact, your intro was a misrepresentation of just me. That was kind of a mashup of our own team. My background is in data science purely, and I've worked for a lot of top organizations like University of California, San Francisco, Google. The other folks, so we've got machine learning engineers from MIT. Our kind of finance lead is a Stanford grad. Our CTO did a lot of seminal work at major companies like Fidelity. In fact, this is brand new, hot off the presses. We've just brought in a UI UX engineer from Facebook. We have business development support that worked at Apple. So like we have a lot of prior big business, big tech experience, and at the same time, a lot of deep research experience, not just in AI and in blockchain. But our token ecosystem is very unique to the crypto industry. And we're fortunate that we have a PhD in econ with a deep background in game theory working with us. So it's a very multifunctional team, and I think it takes all of those different backgrounds to pull this together and have it not only work from a technical level, but be scalable as a business as well.
And so you basically created a machine learning system that works on transactions. So how is that different from a machine learning that's based on language? I mean, sort of what different insights does it give you, and how different is it to how is it like? Is it like a completely different beast?
Yes, it ultimately is, for two reasons. One, because where we are in the development cycle and the research cycle is very, very early compared to where the broader research community is right now in text training. So firstly, our models are substantially smaller, and they have a much narrower purpose. A modern LLM does many things very well. When we train a model, we ask it to do one thing very, very well. That's why, I said at the top, right now in a given network implementation for our app Hoku, there's over 40 different models. Each of those models has a job to do, and when we pull them all together, we get this emergent intelligence that can do multiple things and do it well. But it is ultimately the job of many different models kind of being good at one thing. And that's the broader goal in the world of AI, is generalization. Develop a single architecture, or at least a single family of models that can do many things well. I think the second thing that's important to note about this is when you look at how an LLM learned, what it learned from, it's an oversimplification, but it's still accurate to say it has learned from things that we've said and things that we've written down. And that's useful, right? Because as a species, we like to record all manner of things in text. Right? We write about physics just as much as we write about what we ate for dinner last night. So those sources of information are they capture other domains beyond just the written word, but they do so indirectly. And inside the blockchain, we're actually recording actions and behaviors.
Yeah.
And so a model can now learn directly from those things instead of learning based off of somebody recording a series of events as actions and behaviors. And that is really what's so exciting about this direction of research.
And could you, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Like, because behavior actually tells more about human beings than sort of past records, which also records, of course, behavior. But does that also mean that at some point you can merge the two, sort of the knowledge from one sort of combined with that of the other?
I believe so. I absolutely believe so. And when you really look closely at what the true thought leaders in the industry are saying, the researchers, the folks that don't necessarily have a company to shill, most of them believe that the end of the road for LLMs is not artificial general intelligence. That we are going to need different training domains. We're going to need different modeling architectures. That this is not going to lead directly to AGI. And I think this is a potential, I'm not going to say solution, but certainly a new area of exploration. Because if you accept the reduction, right, that the LLMs have learned from the history of everything we've said or thought, and that over time the blockchain will start recording a history of everything that we've ever done, you can put those things together and you're going to get new emergent intelligence, new emergent capabilities. Until yesterday, I would have told you I kind of feel a bit all alone in that. But one of our guys actually found that XAI, so the builders of Grok, right, Elon's LLM company, they just posted a job for somebody with crypto experience because they want to be able to explore the blockchain as a training data source, which is incredibly exciting. You can love Elon, you can hate Elon, but that guy sees the future more than any other human I've ever known. And so him saying, yeah, there's something in there and that I will find valuable as an AI engineer is a massive validation of the things that we have said for a long time.
Yeah, and I think in the future, or in the very near future, I think his platform will combine all these features, right, in one platform. So it kind of makes sense from that perspective. And does this new AI, if I can call it like that, this large language model, bring new insights to market, or potentially bring new insights to markets and economies? How could it change markets and economies?
So I think there's two sides of that question. In a broader sense, yes, intelligence can bring value to every domain. And if we are right that the intelligence that can be gleaned from activity on chain is additive to the intelligence that can be gleaned from text corpuses, then I think the answer is just unarguably yes. But there is a certain limitation in the area that I think we care about a lot, which is crypto and Web3. We don't believe that, and again, just to oversimplify, that simply transcoding every transaction into text is going to lead to benefits inside the Web3 community. For one, actually taking a transaction and converting it to text is a hard thing to do. It's very slow to do at scale, and it's always going to be imprecise to some degree. And if you want to have a language model interface with the chain, that's a requirement. You have to convert the activity in that transaction or the activity in the chain. You have to convert it to text. That is the only structure that a language model can understand. And so that's where we argue that there needs to also be AI that is actually learning from chain data natively. And it's perfectly feasible. There's nothing about text that makes it unique in the sense that AIs can learn from it, right? Like that's proven by the fact that we use just slightly different neural architectures to understand pictures and videos. All AI fundamentally does is identify patterns. And there are absolutely patterns in coded blockchain architectures. And so we think that if you want to have AI that will benefit the crypto economy, the Web3 economy, you inevitably need to develop AI and machine learning models that are learning natively from the data inside a transaction.
Yeah, so that becomes sort of more fluid and less cumbersome. Because I guess a lot of data also get lost if you have to translate it back to text.
Yes.
And then, yeah.
Yep.
Is it also just sort of like a side question, like how do sort of LLMs and AI compare to the human brain in that sense? Like, because we, of course, process a lot of stuff immediately, like, you know, like you're, but an LLM and an AI, I always have these discussions, they can never reach AGI, and it's impossible, and it's what you put in, is what you get out. But sort of how do, for like a newbie or a noob or somebody, a layperson, how are they really different from us?
I mean, I think it's potentially very instructive to the question of whether an LLM will lead us to AGI. Um, our brain works in specialization, right? There you have certain areas of your brain that are good at one thing. You know, you have Broca's area is going to be good at speech. We dedicate almost a third of the brain's volume by mass to vision. That just shows you how complicated vision actually is. Um, our scent is coming from one of the only dedicated physical organs. I believe it's the only one of our senses that has a dedicated physical organ that is separate from the rest of the brain. So, like, our ability to perceive the world is specialization. We have different parts of our brain or our body that become good at each of those things. And I think that's, like I said, very instructive to AI, and certainly why I subscribe to the opinion that a language model, or even like an ensemble of language models, is not going to get us to generalization. And I think it's more likely going to be just sort of simplifying and extracting. You have models that are good at understanding language. You have models that become good at understanding 3D spaces and physical reality. You perhaps have models that become very good at understanding behavioral economics and behaviors and actions, i.e., coming from blockchain data. And then that ensemble becomes something closer to generalization. And in that example, as I said, the brain is incredibly instructive when we want to think about what the future of AI might look like, or at least generalized AI might look like.
So basically, all these specializations, they need to be developed, and then together as a whole, once they sort of communicate with each other, then you can sort of approximate perhaps a human being. Would there ever be sort of like something lacking there, or do you think it's possible in theory?
Well, I mean, this is where you get down some pretty deep metaphysical rabbit holes. Consciousness itself is a really tricky thing in this case. Um, and I think just because you see language models, kind of attempt things adjacent to blackmail, or do things that might suggest the self-preservation, objectives. I don't think we're I don't think that in and of itself is in any way indicative that, like, these things are taking on sort of human traits that would eventually lead to something like a soul or consciousness. Um, but all that aside, uh, that is distinctly human. And I don't know that we will ever create machine intelligence that is truly replaces that kind of essence, or that kind of being. So, will we have humanoid robots that are incredibly good at mimicking our behaviors, at doing things that we would do under the same circumstances? Yeah, absolutely. I think we're already pretty much there. But will there be a point where there is truly no distinction? Sort of like a Turing test on a broader scale. I don't believe that it'll ever actually happen. And I think if it does, it's a fairly scary future scenario to consider.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a very interesting question. We could talk for hours about this kind of thing.
I imagine too. Yeah, but because when I use Grok a lot, right? But I also know people who use ChatGPT or even DeepSeek. But for example, when you have a conversation with Grok, it really feels like you're talking to somebody, right? I mean, I know it's not a person, but you can have a very fluid, dynamic conversation with him, or it, I should say. There you go. But it anticipates what you're asking. It gives very clear, concise. There's humor. There's all of it. And then some people say, yeah, it's just guessing what you're gonna say next. But isn't that also what we do, right? I mean,
it is.
Yeah. So what's the difference there?
Yeah, but I mean, I think it becomes interesting to now ask about the other dimensions of, say, an in-person conversation, right? That there is speech, but there are so many other ways that we transfer information back and forth when we're talking. Even here, we're on video, and you still have access to a massive amount of other information outside of the words that are going back and forth.
True.
And I think that is where certainly today, these kind of Turing tests would fail. But I think that is where, even when you look out into the future, I think there will always be a distinction. I think you will always be able to tell that the other thing you're talking to is a thing, and not another person, because of all of, I guess, A, all of those different dimensions that we communicate information, but B, there is something like very deep in our brains that is meant to identify anomalies, right? Things that break the pattern. And so we may not even be able to put our finger on it and say, this is exactly what made me believe this thing is a cyborg and not a human. But I think our brains will learn to identify those anomalies, in the same way that our brains learn to determine that was a lion's eyes in that long grass over there, and not something else.
Yeah, it sort of misses embodiment. But purely on speech, I think it already passed the Turing test, right?
100%.
Yeah, right.
100%. And like I feel like I can detect almost like different personalities in the different major LLMs out there, and that in of itself is truly fascinating. My favorite is by far Anthropic's platform. That is the one that I have found the greatest success with. But Grok is probably one of the most interesting to talk to, I would say.
It does have a nice sense of humor. What do you like about Anthropic?
I think it's found a nice balance of not being like too sycophantic, and it will challenge me more readily than others will. It feels as if it's a bit more objective, and that is probably those are my biggest complaints, for example, of using any of the OpenAI products. I am always right when I talk to ChatGPT, and it drives me nuts, because if I go one more prompt and say, okay, like critique what I just said, it's got 15 different ways that I've made a mistake or something. And that definitely has frustrated me a lot with the OpenAI platforms recently.
And what do you, sometimes you ask? Sometimes I ask Grok a certain question, and then I ask somebody else with a totally different personality, and who looks at different things completely differently. Ask another AI the same question to see sort of if they match up, right? But in how far is it the case that these AIs just sort of parrot back what you want to hear.
Is like, you mean do they do that now? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or to what degree, I should say, I guess.
I mean, I think to a fairly high degree, and this is why prompting matters so much. You know, it's why like prompt engineer roles have become so popular. Like any tool, your experience and your skills using it will matter a lot in the outcomes that you enjoy from it. And very small changes to your prompts can have profound impacts on what you actually get back from it. That is, I think, a very important skill to learn if you want to be successful using these platforms. And by successful, I mean that they're truly additive. You know, they all work, right? You can talk to them all, but whether they're truly providing a benefit that you couldn't otherwise get, I think that comes down to smart prompt engineering.
So can you give like one or two examples of what is sort of smart prompting compared to, regular or dumb prompting?
I mean, I think I probably couldn't provide like specific examples, but I think the best advice is honestly to remember you are talking to a multidisciplinary, intelligent machine, and so you need to remember that it is not going to have the same intuition as a person. So establishing scope and context of your question up front is really important. The more general your prompt is, the less valuable that result will be. So any opportunity you can take to anticipate different avenues it might go down that are not beneficial to what you want, eliminate those up front. So like establish the scope and say, I am only talking about this period of time, or I am only talking about this kind of domain, or whatever the prompt has to be. The best, I think the best example that I can give is like that classic interview question. Say you meet an alien, tell them how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the folks that are not engineers or that have not been asked this question before will just say, grab 2 slices of bread, put peanut butter on one, jelly on the other, stick together. But when you step back, you have to think, okay, what's bread? What's a knife? What's peanut butter? Where is it? How do I get from A to B? Like, those are the kinds of instructions that machines need. And yes, LLMs need fewer of them, but the more you put those into your prompt, the more beneficial its result is going to be to you, the more quote unquote accurate it'll be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you're like specialized in a specific field, you're much better able to sort of use an AI because you sort of know the field and you know what you can ask and sort of how to the parameters. I guess you could better set the parameters. So back to what you created with the transactions. Like, what kind of things does it see that human beings would miss looking at the data? Like, if they look at the same data, like what would humans miss when they look at it, and what would your AI pick out that is kind of unique about it?
I mean, I think the best example is so our stack, so the pipeline itself, it starts by taking all the active traders on a network and grouping them together based off similar behavioral patterns. We call them clusters, but ultimately all it means is all of the addresses in group number 1, they have similar trading histories, they have similar risk preferences, they make similar size trades, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that we use those to identify price trends is we will look and say, okay, this token is really popular in cluster 1. Now it's becoming popular in 2. Now it's going to 3. And so you kind of extrapolate that out, and what it gives us is the ability to watch trend formation at a more microscopic level than any other tool out there, right? Like, you could go on Etherscan and you could watch like the Uniswap pool, but you don't know when that second transaction comes in, is that an entirely new type of trader that this token is now attractive to? Or is it still just the exact same meme coin trader, right? And like to some degree, being overly reductive, that's how like a market-wide trend forms. Something is appealing to one type of trader, and then it becomes appealing to a broader and broader and broader set until it's ultimately market-wide. And so that pattern is really what Hoku's models are designed to spot. And I think it's it's kind of its superpower. That is what makes it really good at predicting price movements. It's binning traders and then being able to watch what are each of those different groups buying, spotting the overlap in real time, and then predicting, is it going to go to cluster 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to the entire network?
So I think you mentioned at the start, before we went live, that it did pick up sort of this big crash in Bitcoin, right?
Not I would not say on a macro level, but on a micro level, it has been showing this for weeks. If you look at sort of the aggregation, how many of these signals are sell signals versus buy signals, it has been very heavy on the sell for quite some time. The biggest problem with the larger tokens like Bitcoin is you have to think about where does the instigating factor for a price movement come from. Bitcoin is so big that when its price moves, it's likely because of some news or some other broader macroeconomic shift. We can't observe that inside the blockchain, certainly not yet.
Yeah,
That's why
so
Hoku is really
the
good at the,
externalities.
yes,
Yeah.
that is why Hoku is very, very good at the longer tailed assets, the lower liquidity, because almost all of its price signal is either baked in the chain or is actually being driven by effects that are inside the blockchain.
What would you need to, if you have like the same product and you want sort of to get the same effect for Bitcoin, how would you sort of get all these externalities into an AI, right? Is that what we talked about earlier with all these specializations that you have to combine them in one?
Yeah, I do think so. I do think so. Especially with something like Bitcoin, I think you would essentially want, real-time access to each of the different domains that you believe would drive a price change, and that would go far beyond just transaction activity on the chain itself. I think it's also why a lot of LLM builders, a lot of crypto startups will focus on like sentiment analysis on platforms, like Twitter. I think that can be extremely valuable, but I think it has its limits. Two, it is
what would be the limits?
sentiment is often not going to reflect price. Certainly not at inflection points. Bitcoin is going to turn, and we on crypto Twitter will probably still be whining about it until it gets back up to something close to its all-time high. I think it's going to be situational. You might be able to detect larger pivots, but like smaller price movements, sentiment is probably going to do a pretty bad job of predicting. In those cases, looking at larger money flows is probably going to be a lot more predictive. And I've seen some examples of that in some previous work where we could watch the order books on Binance, and the order books on Binance would be very predictive of the large cap assets like ETH and Bitcoin, especially because this is going back several years when Binance was, I don't know, probably 30 to 40% of the global liquidity for Bitcoin. Each data source is going to have its strengths and weaknesses when it comes to predicting price movements.
I'm not know if you're familiar with him, but I think there was this macro analyst called Martin Armstrong, and he developed, I think the name of the AI was like Sophocles or something along those lines. I forgot the name of the AI. But I think he sort of used these sort of broader macro money flows to predict events, and supposedly he was very successful at doing that because money tells a lot about human behavior, of course.
Yep.
So that makes sense. I also want to ask you if, because Hoku just, like you sort of explained, if you use it, it gives you sort of supreme access or knowledge about, the flow, the trend of a particular token, let's say. But what happens if everybody uses Hoku at the same time, right? I mean, then
we get this question all the time. So first of all, like today, Hoku advises human traders. And so you have that layer of, let's say, randomness. Not every trader is going to react to every single signal that Hoku generates the same way. And so you will have some randomness in there, and that would act as a deterrent for kind of what the end state argument against a tool like this is. Now, we like everyone else, we are working towards automation, right? We want to allow people to simply parameterize a trading agent and let it do the work on your behalf. Not for least of which being, if you look at the actual data, a huge portion of the return is lost in just the first few minutes. Markets move very fast, faster than humans can. And in that environment, what we envision will be one of the most, let's say, our currently most successful strategy will be to allow users to essentially input to their agent a list of other addresses that they would like their agent to effectively learn from. And so now when you combine two different sources of information, you have a core set of signals that every agent has access to, but then every person that creates a trading bot also layers on top of that, hey, Mr. Bot, I think that these 3 wallets are really good at trading. I want you to emulate them. I want you to copy their strategies. I want you to just more broadly learn from them. You get a system that doesn't become self-defeating. You get a system that becomes endlessly competitive because now users are actually using skill to make their agent outperform another agent. But I think most importantly, you get a system where agents can learn recursively from one another. When that first system goes online, all those wallets they point to are going to be human-controlled wallets. But over time, more and more of them will become agent control wallets. And so now we get this kind of feedback loop that still has a high degree of, say, random variation in it, an edge for people to truly compete, but preserves the underlying value of Hoku in the sense that it's using chain data to predict what's going to happen next with prices.
So basically you can personalize them and make them or customize them into, whatever it is that you are looking for. But does that also not sort of it also doesn't that also sort of contain the danger that what they say about the internet of slop, that sort of the AI starts using bad information in order to train itself, or is that sort of taken out of the equation?
Well, you can almost interpret this design as a human in the loop design, right? Because the human is picking the wallets that they want their Hoku agent to learn from.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And so
they
that
have skin in the game. They don't
yeah,
want
in a sense, yes. So that would be at least a potential defense against that kind of thing. I'd also say, like, slop in the current sense is possible because there is no objective function that's being optimized, right? Like, if there was some objective function where people were penalized for putting out garbage on the internet and rewarded for putting out quality, there would be a lot less of that out there, but there's not, right? Like, in fact, often the garbage is what we'll look at most. But trading has an objective function.
Yeah,
Make more money. right?
Yeah.
So if that wallet starts making less money,
Yeah,
it
it's
will
gone.
now get, you know, demoted, and it won't be part of
Yeah.
the learning corpus for the agents.
And can these AIs that you developed or similar AIs that are not there yet, but you know, in theory, could these also hallucinate? Like, you know, because that's a big problem with AIs, right?
I don't think in this context, unless you would define a hallucination as a losing trade, then no, I don't think so, because um, essentially these AIs will have three choices to make: um, buy, sell, or hold.
Mhm.
And and certainly when we develop them, they will be constrained to only do those things, and they will only have access to those three buttons. So like a true hallucination is probably fairly unlikely. It's just more it will get it wrong, right? Trades will be bad trades. It will happen,
Yeah.
and that's just inevitable. Our argument is more simple. Um, Even a bad trading agent is probably going to win in a zero sum game that is trading, more often than a human will in the future markets. And in Hoku, our goal is to democratize that, is to give them better access, give regular people access to really powerful trading agents. And of course, every single trading agent builder out there says that, every one of them. But the one thing that we have done that's very different is we are actually tapping into a truly unique data source to make sure our agents are actually good at it and they can compete. That's why we started by building the signals first and the agent second. If you actually go and look at all the other startups out there, they built the agent first and they just plug it into the exact same data that every other agent has access to. That in a way is a form of slop. What we're doing is the opposite. Essentially, we're developing proprietary data feeds and then building the agent that essentially everyone else has.
And crypto, with its digital distributive ledger system, is ideally suited for this kind of AI, right?
Oh
Because
yes.
because you couldn't really do it without that framework, or could you? Like,
Well, I mean, you could do it, but it's just not going to perform as well in an environment where you don't have high resolution visibility in the market actors. That is really the key. And when we talk to like traditional finance people, this is what gets them excited. You know, we can effectively tell them, we can watch the individual action of every single trader in this market, and we can watch it in real time. That's not possible on, you know, the NYSE, right? Like this
you can
kind of
only
thing
see
is
an
not
aggregate.
possible. Yes, you always get aggregates. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what do you think, like, would be sort of the biggest problem or difficulty moving forward uh, with this kind of technology, or this kind of yeah, AI, I guess.
Well, I mean, it will in itself begin a new arms race. Right now, we're the only one doing it, but there will be people that start doing it. Um, and the arms race will be around the signal itself. So the data that we layer on top of the transaction data, like that is what's proprietary to us. It's not like we have an AI that's literally just reading each transaction that comes out of the out of a node. There's a layer of information that we put on there to help the AI contextualize each transaction. For example, like we said, we put every address into a behavioral bin, and that gives a machine learning model the ability to say, you know, this token is appealing to a broader set of traders and therefore is more likely to see future price action than this other token. So like the layer we put on of just grouping addresses essentially can say, we have 5 of the exact same transactions. Everything is pretty much the same for 2 different tokens. But in one of those tokens, all 5 transactions are made by the same kind of wallet. That doesn't indicate broad appeal, and all else equal would indicate a lower likelihood of a future price action. Our behavioral layer now tells that same AI, well, actually, this thing is interesting to multiple different trader types already. It'll probably go up in the future. So there will be an arms race in that layer, right? The feature layer that is driving the agent's ability to make good trades. So I think that is that, and it's the case with every market, right? That will be the biggest challenge, is making sure that we maintain our lead in developing proprietary, inference signals for these trading agents to make decisions with.
And of course, with crypto and blockchain, you can do trades. That's what we're talking about right now. But you also have, of course, DeFi and on-chain governance systems, and usually they are all sort of interconnected. What could this AI sort of tell us about those kind of things, and how would that sort of work all together?
Yeah, I mean, this is where things get really exciting. We focus on trading today primarily just because it's the only real evergreen space in crypto. Um, but over time, more and more different types of applications are coming online in completely different sectors and verticals. And that is adding new domains to the potential training data. And in a sense, ultimately, all we're doing here is matching a wallet to a smart contract, and a smart contract can represent anything. So what we see as the future is that these kinds of intelligence, they can scale to completely different verticals relatively easily. So because we put traders into groups, one of the unique benefits of Hoku is personalized trading, right?
Mhm.
If a signal is being driven by the group that you are in, it's more likely to be relevant to you. We can go and expand that same logic to gaming or GameFi, right? So the entire now scope is just like in-game asset activity. Well, we can look at your behavioral history, we can understand what's unique about you, and then we can match that to something that's happening in the market. And now, instead of having to search the entire world of game assets or game activity, you can get a personalized recommendation. And you zoom all this all the way out, and that is where we believe that this kind of intelligence can have the greatest impact on Web3 writ large. We can make discovery better and more intuitive for any Web3 user across any different vertical.
Yeah, because that's the difference between the large language model that trains on language and history and records, and this one that actually trains on behavior. And then as you sort of expand all the different types of behavior in different domains that are all happening online and are recorded through the blockchain, then you actually get this sort of potential AGI moment, right? Where you actually sort of by the specialization where we talked about earlier, because it's all these different domains and then they sort of merge into.
Yeah, I mean, certainly within the Web3 space itself, we believe that a single foundation model can generalize to all verticals. And in that environment, any DApp can plug into it and glean instant intelligence about a wallet, about a transaction, and then use that to create a superior experience for whoever's connected. At the end of the day, the fundamental problem with Web3, at least that we care most about, is every single DApp gives every single user the exact same experience. And we haven't done that on the internet since the late 90s. So we are standing back as an industry, and we're screaming to the outside world, come try this brand new technology. But the single most important innovation on the internet that brought all those users on, we don't do it yet. There's no personalization in Web3. There's nothing intelligent or intuitive about it. When you connect your wallet, you're going to get the exact same experience as the next person, and the person came before you. And Facebook, YouTube, Google, Netflix, Spotify, every single one of them, they develop intelligent recommendations using algorithms.
And
That is the
feels
one
good.
common thread in every, everyone, literally every major online platform can point to algorithms as either its source of dominance or growth. And
Yeah.
we don't do it on Web3 yet.
So basically, if I hear you correctly, and all these different blockchains start to become interoperable and merge, and we are then sort of like the nodes in a big digital brain, actually.
In a way,
Yeah.
in a way. And right now that brain is not using any kind of context, any comparison to provide information to an end user. It is literally, it's as if you are you're kind of like in a dark room all on your own. There's all this other information in the chain that can tell you something about whatever it is you're doing at this time. And apps are not using it today. So the example that I talk about all the time, why context is so important. If you were to look at a transaction on Etherscan, and it's a very complicated DeFi strategy across a bunch of different protocols, and you were to look at another transaction and it's a hack, it's an exploit, those are going to look very similar on the surface. The context is what tells you one is a hack and the other is just a really smart trader. So you can scale that down to millions of other different examples. And it's that kind of context that can create more dynamic and personalized experiences. It can create better security. It can create better discovery. It can create better economics and profitability for the underlying, business owners and developers. That is what created the modern internet, context and algorithmic intelligence. But we don't do it yet in Web3.
Yeah, my friend Gerald from Proof of Work, he actually mentions what you just said. Like, at the moment, AI is actually used as an offensive hacker's weapon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can actually also use AI to secure as a defensive weapon. And
Absolutely.
that's what you're talking about. Right?
In a way, yes. Yeah. Yep. In a way, yes.
Interesting. Yeah. So what is sort of, you've done a lot of interviews, you have been on a lot of spaces. What is the question that nobody's asking?
I think unfortunately it's the one that we're talking about right now. It's what kind of information is hidden and locked up inside the chain, and what can we do with it? That should be a much more dominant element of discourse in the industry when our goal is to bring more users on chain. We can build in all of these different verticals. We can create a new social media app, and we can create a new banking app, and there will be cases where just on an economic basis crypto can compete, but in a broader sense it will be user experience that the final battle is fought over. And we will be able to develop better user experiences only by mining the information inside the chain. So I just don't think we are talking enough about how do you unlock the signal that's hidden inside that entire transaction ledger, and use it to your advantage as a business owner, as a developer, etc.
Yeah, but that's why we have you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I often wish there was a lot more people out there that did care about this. And frankly, it's always surprising to me. I've been thinking about this problem for, I don't know, 7-8 years, and working on some version of it for 5. And if you asked me like 5 years ago, would we be still kind of on our own out there? I would have said, no way. This is the most proven playbook in the history of the internet. Someone is going to eventually, figure this out and start bringing it over to Web3. And it's stunning to me that we are still standing here in 2026, and this is not a common interest. in Web3.
Is it? Do you think it also has to do with your background? Because the first time that you and me talked, you mentioned you have this interest in game theory, which I think is very important when you look at these kind of things. But I imagine that like network theory or complexity theory, those kind of domains, and of course AI itself, which is like multidisciplinary, of course. I kind of remember when I was still studying philosophy, like long time ago, and they were talking about neural networks and everybody thought like it will take like 50 years or might even go nowhere at all. And now here we are. But that's a sort of side note. But what is it? Maybe something in your background that gives you a unique angle or perspective on this issue, that you're sort of way ahead of the rest, and that many people still have to catch up? Or what do you think is causing the reason that you're at the vanguard?
I think for at least a big portion of time, it was really just, this isn't the priority yet. The way that I think about the development life cycle of crypto app development, at large, is goal number one was build stuff that doesn't break. I think we already passed that point.
Yeah.
So now the goal becomes build something that the regular people want to use. And I don't believe it takes any kind of specialized background for someone who is challenged with that objective. Build something that regular people want to use, to connect the dots between, well, what's the common thread in every single popular user app on the internet today? Okay, it's generally algorithms. And now let me go and deploy that in my app in Web3. So in a sense, yes, like there's a certain amount of background, and then there's a certain amount of just timing. But I think even when you take those two things away, there's still a certain degree of just, it doesn't make sense. And I would be one of the worst people to really opine on it. You ask some of your other guests that aren't thinking about this, like what's their reaction? In most conversations I have with people, there's not a lot of pushback, but when you ask them, okay, like, why not? Like, why not now? There's also not a lot of very discrete, clear, logical responses to that. And so today, at least for the last like 9 months or so, we've generally abandoned the B2B route. Like, we've stopped trying to build a lot of these tools for other developers because of everything that I just said. We will go back to that it's guaranteed. And we already have a greater success in providing traders this kind of intelligence. But that's, in many ways, it's a bit of a dead end. We can be the greatest trading bot developers that Web3's ever seen, and we will have done nothing for the ability to onboard the next billion users. And that's frankly what's more important.
So I guess hearing your words, that's where you're going to focus next, if you sort of look into the future.
It's the natural outcome of us seeking generalization.
Yeah.
So, Hoku today is for traders, and in a way it's for discovery, help you find the trades that are going to be most profitable for you. All we start doing is expanding the scope of the types of smart contracts that we're analyzing, and it now becomes something useful for real world assets, for gaming assets, and in a way, even social media. So like platforms like Farcaster that are recording media posts on chain. All of that stuff can ultimately come in scope. And so just simply by seeking generalization of the kind of intelligence we're developing, it naturally comes full circle back to offering other builders and other developers tools that they can use. And the hope is that enough time has elapsed, that there is substantially more demand for that capability when we do have the generalization in place.
And then I think, one of the reasons, apart from the immense amount of expertise that you need to have in all these different domains, and then, like you said, how difficult it was to train that AI on all those data sets. But I guess another reason might also be that, crypto does have this really bad reputation, right? And recently with the with the Epstein files, it got another smear. Maybe as a sort of for maybe people who are unfamiliar with Bitcoin and crypto, how would you answer a complaint by somebody and say, okay, these developers were associated with this bad person? What would you say in response to somebody like that? Like, that, because it's a kind of silly argument, but what would be your defense against an argument or a complaint along those lines?
My answer is always the same. Every tool mankind has ever created has been dual use. You can use blockchain for good, and you can use it for evil. You can use, genetics and genome research and medicine for good and for evil. You can use a hammer to drive a nail. You can also use it to ruin someone's day. So it is always up to the human beings at the helm to decide what they want to use their tool with, for, but it is never an indictment of the tool itself, that somebody did something bad with it. That's an indictment of the people.
So you're not of the opinion that it's compromised, the network?
No, not even a little bit. No more compromise than the rest of the internet out there. I mean, come on, like if you're really going to take that argument to its logical conclusion, you need to just cancel your subscription with your ISP and close the internet, because there's filth and awful things everywhere. This is, again, it is more an indictment of where we are as a species and what our future holds than anything about blockchain and decentralized consensus. You want to see stuff like what's come out in the Epstein files happen less frequently. Speak up.
Yeah.
Do something. The amount of people that were privy to what was happening in his life for decades and did nothing, that's where the indictment lies.
Yeah.
We are very, very good at sticking our heads in the sand when we see problems. We don't like confronting problems. We like kicking them down the road and saying someone else will do something. That has nothing to do with the tool. That's on us.
And in that sense, a tool like Bitcoin could actually help, right? By making those behaviors and actions transparent. And
yes, absolutely. Certainly more transparent than the equivalent, right? Like you're never going to see wire transfers unless you work at the bank. But at least in an open network, that stuff is all out there.
And then technically, right, if there was any possible attack, it was through the traditional finance means that were used in order to gain leverage, right? So that's where the real problem was and still is. So I totally agree, but I would, it's really nice to hear a very smart person like yourself agree. So looking forward to the future with Hoku and perhaps also other things that you're developing. Where do you see things go? And what is your next step? I guess you sort of already answered it, but maybe you want to go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So, right now, what we are really focused on is, I guess, two things. Continuing to improve the performance of the signals. So over the last 6 or 8 weeks, we have pretty much torn down the entire model architecture that's behind the signals themselves and built it back up because we've learned a ton. And the irony is really, up until this point, we are still using truly version 1 models, despite the fact that, as I said, we've learned a ton. So those have been completely torn down, and we're in the process of retraining all of them. That will ultimately lead to even better signals, which will, kind of our first area to unlock value there is we're already talking to a bunch of other LLM builders and algo trading shops who want access to that. So I mentioned before, we're running our own internal trading strategy, our own bot that is primarily to understand that customer archetype, understand how to structure that WebSocket and its payload so that's easiest for people to consume. So that's kind of avenue one for us, is doubling down on the signals with a bunch of new research that we've done. And we're fairly close to being able to at least get all of that into a staging environment and test it. The other path is simplifying Hoku. We've gotten this feedback from day one, and frankly, I don't believe that I did a good enough job reacting to it quickly enough. Everyone that sees it is like, wow, this thing's super powerful. It looks really cool. I don't know what to do first. And in an environment where agents are becoming kind of the standard, everything is almost getting really, really sort of simplified. We're
Like a
on the wrong side of
tutorial.
the spectrum. What's that?
So maybe you would want to sort of like make an intuitive tutorial for
No, what we've done that. There's lots of help docs out there, tutorials. What we're actually doing is far more aggressive. We're essentially building out a completely new layer of the app, and we think of it as sort of like pro mode and basic mode. So when a new user hits the app, they'll be guided through, again, there's just a basic tutorial, but more importantly, a lot of the most say complex and deep features will be at least initially hidden, and the person will be essentially guided through to their first winning trade without a lot of those other distractions being in place. And that's really the goal in, I think, any app is, get the person to that first, neurotransmitter dump, and then you've earned the right to ask them to learn new things. And that's sort of the misstep that we've taken is, we've put a whole bunch of really powerful tools up there, but the odds of somebody making it to that success point quickly enough where they want to go back and learn those tools is very low. So our simple mode, or sort of pro versus basic mode, you will essentially land in the app. There'll be a very nice sort of set of guardrails that is ultimately taking you to at that time the best signal. You'll be asked to trade it, and if you win, you come back for more. It's nothing too magical about it.
So do you want to learn more? Click here.
Yeah.
Yep. I guess it would be overwhelming, like when you first open the app, and especially if you're new to crypto and all that kind of stuff. It's extremely overwhelming, I imagine.
Yeah.
I got one final question, which is a little bit outside of the box. Do you imagine what's more likely, a future that is based on gold, or a future that's based on Bitcoin?
I mean, I genuinely believe it's the latter. There are too many inherent properties to Bitcoin that are just fundamentally superior. And given enough time, I just believe that those properties win out. We have a big hill to climb. I shouldn't even say a big hill. We have a hill that I think has been painted as being big in quantum. I don't actually believe it really is. And once we get through that, I don't think there's really much else that somebody can point to and say, yeah, gold is just fundamentally better.
And what are those properties that you have in mind specifically? I mean, of course, you could say Bitcoin is, infinitely divisible, for example, and very portable. The usual stuff compared to gold. But are there sort of like special properties that you have in mind looking into the future?
I mean, certainly all those things matter.
Mm-hmm.
Transferability, divisibility. But I think the greater benefit is really in control. People will often criticize Bitcoin because you got somebody like Michael Saylor that owns whatever 3% of the supply, but there are fewer factors that can influence the the direction of that economy, Bitcoin, than gold. If you had sufficient resources and you had the will and need, you could massively influence the supply of gold, right? Just to say tomorrow, Donald Trump says, you know what, we're going to convert the entire defense spending budget to gold mining because we want to have all the gold in the world. There's nothing stopping him from doing that, and he will be successful. The only stop right now is rational economics. The amount of gold comes out of the ground depends entirely on its price and its cost to mine it. Bitcoin can't be influenced in that regard, and that when you really scale up and start thinking about American hegemony and conflicts amongst superpowers, these seemingly laughable scenarios are a lot less laughable. And in a world economy that is mediated by something that is independent and uncontrollable as Bitcoin, I think just ultimately wins the day. Yeah.
And do you think when you look at AI, that Bitcoin also has an advantage over something like gold as being a standard?
I don't. I like to think of AI in its sort of more pure form of just machine intelligence. And in that sense, I don't see a lot of connectivity. The biggest exception is certainly, transaction settlement and an entire machine economy. And I think it's just crypto at large has a huge advantage. Bitcoin itself obviously would never really have any value add, but like Lightning networks, so the higher throughput networks, I think that's a prerequisite to AI's advancement. Current financial rails would melt if we try to release an entire agent-driven economy that needs to settle micropayments and needs to, handle collisions and all these other, things. Crypto has a huge advantage there for sure. And if like your ultimate goal is, let's develop the smartest intelligence out there, Bitcoin itself, crypto, I don't think has a huge role in it. I think its role is more in implementation and deployment.
And then the final question, like, some people also say, especially looking, we just had a bull market. It's probably over, and we're heading into a bear market. So it was kind of disappointing to a lot of people. They expected like, moonshots, and we got like 126 was sort of the height. And some people make the argument like, diminishing returns, don't expect the world. But when you sort of look at the future with the Internet of Things, robotics, AI, do you think that crypto has reached its peak? Or do you think like, in for example, next bull run, there's more gains to come? And of course, it's not financial advice, but how do you look at it through a financial angle?
I think crypto today is at the same place the internet was in the mid 90s. I think we are just barely scratching the surface of what you will see out of distributed ledger technology, what crypto asset markets will look like. There is nowhere near the kind of adoption of this technology that most other technologies have reached, and it's primarily because it's new. All things take time. Even if you are just coming to the crypto industry today, I think you can still safely say that you are early. When it comes to like asset price returns, this is just a normal outcome. As a market becomes mature, its volatility goes down, and that means both sides of the chart become more compressed. We will see, lower highs, but we will also see higher lows. And that's not something you have to just trust. You can just pull the data and it's there. It shows on the charts. So in a sense, I don't think anyone should expect the kinds of sort of point-to-point multiples that we've seen in the past, because that just violates financial theory. But if they are concerned that they are too late to this industry or to these markets, I think that's ludicrous. We have billions of people online today. I mean, Facebook, 1 in every 2 human beings on planet Earth is on Facebook. And crypto is more like 1 in every probably few 100,000. All we have to do is kind of have that. And that will bring literally millions of new users in here. That's millions of new essentially token buyers, and not necessarily for speculative purposes. But if you want to do anything on the ETH network, you need the ETH token. So I think as there becomes broader and deeper demand for crypto technology, that flows through to an asset price. But those are the kind of fundamental changes that take time. They don't happen in one cycle, and they don't create 100x in a matter of 2 months like previous traders have seen in this world.
And then, of course, you need this value add unlock that someone like yourself provides, right?
I believe that, yes.
Yeah.
I believe if you are going to have mainstream people start using crypto, the economics will not be enough. We are not rational consumers. If given the chance to save a small amount of money, but suffer through a worse experience, we will always put up money. At least the majority of Westerners will. And that is where we need to start developing the same kind of really sticky, really fun, or at least engaging online experiences that has made every single successful Web2 platform.
Agreed. Daniel, I want to thank you for this awesome conversation. Where can people find you, and what is it? Is there anything else that you want to say before we close?
No, I mean, as always, it's been a pleasure. I think the only way I would sort of sum all this up is just to say it is on all of us to push this community forward in whatever direction that we all believe is best. And that direction should never be price centric. The price of Bitcoin, it matters so much less than the benefits it can provide, the problems it can solve. And that is even more important on programmable networks like Ethereum and some of these other ones out there. So especially on days like today, focus less on the price, focus more on the solutions. And if you're a builder, just build through all this. The price will come back. You will get your returns will come, but it takes perseverance and patience to get there. And as for where to find us, Deep3Labs on X, deep3.ai is our website. My personal X handle is up here on the screen, Daniel 0x53, and that's actually my handle across pretty much all of social. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, Nick. I always love these conversations.
Same here, and we'll link it all down below on our YouTube videos always. Thank you again, Daniel, for being on the show. It's a pleasure, and we hope to have you again soon.
Of course, happy to come back.
Take care.
All right, Nick, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.